I'd like to call to order the October 24th, 2023 meeting of the City of West Palm Beach Historic Preservation Board. Can we please begin with a roll call?
James Murphy.
Present.
Gabriel Jaloski.
Here.
Kristen Kellogg.
Here.
Dan Pickney.
Here.
Amanda Skyer.
Here.
Todd McLean. Trent Swift. Pardon me here. Jeff Sheldon.
Here.
One moment, I'm sorry, I don't have our last name. For our newest alternate, my apologies.
I was saving this for the communication section, but we do have a new second alternate with us, Kyle Waters.
Yep, Kyle Waters, thank you.
Thank you. And Anne, I think we might be missing our motion packets.
Okay, that's something we usually have.
David Burke's also present.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Okay, we now move on to approval of the agenda for tonight's meeting. Do you have any changes to the agenda as presented by staff?
No changes.
Okay. Any members of the board, would you like to change anything on the agenda? Okay, seeing none, can we have a motion to approve?
I move to approve the agenda for tonight's Historic Preservation Board meeting as presented.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. Now moving on to approval of the minutes from the September 26th meeting. Any changes to the minutes as presented in your packet?
Yeah, there are some things that are not correct, mainly presence and absence and who voted yes or not. So I don't know how we can address that.
Do you have, do you want to go through it right now, or is?
I think that's something as staff we can work out
Okay.
and watch that back,
Okay,
the video.
okay. So I guess can we have a motion to approve the minutes pending
minor
changes by staff?
I move to approve the minutes for the September 26, 2023 Historic Preservation Board meeting pending review by staff.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay. Moving on to report of the Historic Preservation Planner.
Yes, so I do have numbers to report. We haven't been reporting since our changeover to EPL. We have approved 361 level 1 reviews since July 31st. This is not in the last month, obviously. And then we have 1 level 2. And then as far as general communications, we did have 1 departure from the board, Todd McLean. And we do have 1 new board member, Kyle Waters. And then we are also, we have our new admin staff, Julius. Thank you.
Wonderful. Well, welcome Kyle and welcome Julius. And Anne, would you also mind updating the board on our conversation regarding demolition by neglect?
Sorry. So we have been, after particularly a case last month, 734 Ardmore, we have been discussing what we have in terms of provisions for demolition by neglect. I can report to you that location has been cited and has quite a running list of fines currently. But as far as historic preservation, we're going to explore possible code changes that maybe could give us more room to cite negligent property owners. If anyone knows of any regulations across the country or has any input that they'd like to share, please feel free to email me as we start this process. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Anne. We now move on to remarks by the chairperson. The matters before us this evening are quasi-judicial in nature, which means we base our decisions on competent, substantial evidence that comes before us. We ask you to please keep that in mind when making your comments. For each project, the applicant will first have an opportunity to present. 15 minutes will be allocated if there is a demolition involved, 10 minutes for other projects. After the applicant's presentation, staff will make their presentation, and following that, we will open it up to public comment, which will be limited to 3 minutes per person. If you do plan on speaking, there is a comment card that you need to fill out that's out in the lobby area. And after public comment, the applicant, if they so choose, may have a rebuttal period. To lead into this, we need to let you know if we've had any conversations outside of this meeting. So we'll now declare any ex parte communications. Mr. Sheldon, if you could please start.
As to all matters on the agenda, 10/24/2023, I have not had ex parte communications. I have not received written communications. I have not conducted an investigation. I have not made a site visit. I have not received expert opinions.
As to all matters on tonight's agenda, I, David Burke, have not had ex parte communications, have not received written communications, have not conducted an investigation, have not made a site visit, and have not received expert opinions. I request that these disclosures and all written communications be made part of the record.
As to all matters on tonight's October 24th, 2023 Historic Preservation Board meeting, I, James Murphy, have not had ex parte communications. I have not received written communications. I have not conducted an investigation. I have not made a site visit. I have not received expert opinions. I request that these disclosures and all written communications be made part of the record.
Amanda Skyer, as to matter 22-8721 Cayuga Drive, I did speak with the applicant, Sam Fish. I also spoke with the city preservation planner, Ann Hamilton, about all of the cases on tonight's agenda. Other than those ex parte communications, I have not, I did receive written communications pertaining also to 721 Cayuga Drive, case number 22-80. I have not conducted an investigation of any of the properties on tonight's agenda, nor made site visits or received expert opinions. I request that these disclosures and all written communications be made part of the record.
Kristen Kellogg, as to all the matters on tonight's agenda, I have not had ex parte communications. I have not received written communications. I have not conducted an investigation. I have not made a site visit. I have not received expert opinions. I request that these disclosures and all written communications be made part of the record.
As to the matter of all items on tonight's agenda, I, Dan Pickney, have not had ex parte communications. I have not received written communications. I have not conducted an investigation. I have not made a site visit. I have not received expert opinions. I request that these disclosures and all written communications be made part of the record.
As to all matters in tonight's agenda, I, Gabe Jaroslavsky, have not had ex parte communications, have not received written communications, have not conducted an investigation, have not made a site visit, have not received expert opinions. I request that these disclosures and all written communications be made part of the record.
Kyle Waters, as to the matters on tonight's agenda, I have not had any ex parte communications. I have not received written communications. I have not conducted an investigation. I have not made a site visit, and I have not received expert opinions. I request that all these disclosures and all written communications be made part of the record.
Thank you. We now enter the public comment portion of our meeting. Is there anyone here that would like to speak on an item that's not on the agenda? If so, now is the time to do so. Okay, seeing none, we will move on to the swearing in of our speakers. If you plan to speak regarding any item on the agenda, if you could please rise and raise your right hand to be sworn in.
Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Thank you. Please be seated. Our first case of the evening is case number 23-45, 431 33rd Street.
Let's see, so I have the plans and renderings here.
Great, perfect, thank you. Good evening, my name is Laurie Swedrow. I'm with Roger Piper Architects. Let me put this drawing, set under drawings up here for you. Okay. As you know, this application was before you back in August, on the 22nd. The recommendation by staff was for a two-story structure. It's a two-story solution to be lowered by roughly 3 feet. However, the board suggested a one-story and or a detached accessory structure solution and wasn't in favor of any two-story solution during the presentation. We went back to discuss all input with the owners, and we are now proposing to you this one-story design, as this meets the needs of the owners and accommodates the input and concerns by staff and you, the board. Achieving staff's approval for a one-story building addition solution as designed is very important to us here. I'd like to do that. Okay. However, we're not in favor of staff's approval conditions for the following reasons. Let's go to the rendering. Please refer to the rendering you might have in front of you. Here it is on the board. It will be obvious that the height of the new gable roof is not a significant issue, as barely noticeable when viewed from eye level across 33rd Street. This is the existing home, existing carport. Lowering the new roof by 1 foot would reduce the distance the roof was raised from 2'5" to 1'5". This would create a very tight condition between the existing gable roof in the front and the new gable wall of the addition. This pertains to particularly construction means and methods. Without sufficient clearance, proper wall-to-roof flashing cannot be installed. If lowering the roof is important to the board, we cannot lower the roof more than 5 inches. We can lower it, the roof 5 inches, which would provide the minimum space needed for proper wall-to-roof flashing, while providing our homeowner the same additional, with some additional ceiling height in the new addition, as well as taller glass doors in the rear of the house. Also, per the staff report, the additional gable intersecting, let me go back to the front, is referring to the small gable that extends over the new laundry room and ends at the existing carport. This roof area can be seen in the roof plan. On sheet A4. You see that okay? I was going to blow it up. This is the existing, this is the addition, and this is the addition over the existing laundry room. Also, you can see this in the south elevation on sheet A5. While this is a plan view from the depicting the elevation heights, the rendering is more accurate to understand when walking down the street or across the street. Due to the geometry of the building and the roof, In this area, we do not believe that there is another roof profile that would work best with the existing roof. Again, as you see in the color rendering of the front facade, the small gable is barely noticeable when viewed from eye level across the street, across 33rd Street. Therefore, at this time, we're asking for approval for this one-story design with no conditions. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions of the applicant?
Yes, I have a question.
Sure.
Can you talk about your reorientation of the front entry door?
The reorientation of the front entry door?
Right, it's
Let's go to the
not
front.
centered currently, correct?
It is not, this is existing. If
So
you go
you're-
to sheet A5,
So you're installing it in the center and putting two kind of like side lights, side panels?
correct. All right, where do I increase the,
And the
Yeah.
trellis element is an existing condition, right?
how do I make this larger?
The front trellis?
Thank you. There we go. There's existing, and this is new.
Mm.
I'm sorry, your question? There, maybe that's helpful.
And so behind that kind of Bahama shutters, currently floor-to-ceiling jalousie windows?
That's what's existing, right?
That's what's,
Right,
and you're
so we're-
proposing kind of like a little knee wall?
Little knee wall and new
Yeah.
windows. Impact.
But
Windows
those
and
aren't,
doors.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think your improvements are just that, great improvement from what the proposal was. I'm glad you really listened and your client was amenable to our input. I think the proposal is super.
Terrific, thank you. Yes, I think that was well worth the exercise. Thank you.
Any further questions of the applicant?
Yeah, in the proposed south elevation, you are showing one type of railing, but on the other elevations, you are showing a different type. Can you explain which one it is, please?
Let me see. Oh, vertical or horizontal?
Well, in the south elevation, there is only one, that one. The one there on the south elevation on the left, there is a railing that doesn't have the horizontal, has only one horizontal, and the other ones are all different.
We'll take direction from you if you like. We'll just go by what code allows unless the owner has a preference. But otherwise,
Okay. And the other comment that I have is, would it be possible, if you look at the floor plan, where the new wall meets the old wall, usually what the guidelines call is for a differentiation there. So usually what we request is that wall is pushed back few inches to have like not a reveal, but like a, interruption in the facade to show what is historic and what is new. Would it be possible to push that back?
to push it back, or how we're differentiating it is with height, with the height.
Or with materials, but you are using all the same material now. So I understand that you are changing the height there, but should be a vertical differentiation also.
And what's the example of how to show that?
I'm sorry?
Pushing it back, meaning making a separation?
Is making a differentiation in the wall. So instead being on the same plane, one wall would be a few inches behind the other one. So the house will become a few inches smaller.
In the past, Ms. Mittner had recommended a score line, not as necessarily a best practice, but something that was acceptable. Given that this is a different type of exterior cladding, I think that something similar could be achieved with the siding itself, instead of like, not a corner board, but something similar
Sure, no
to
problem.
differentiate it. And then that way you're not having to change the overall structure to accomplish that step.
Okay.
I think that would be really important on the proposed east elevation, where the old wood and new composite is blending together. There's an opportunity for some sort of delineation with the addition.
Okay. So materials to separate the two by using different materials.
Well, how confident are you that the existing wood and the composite will blend together? And if not, what was the idea behind?
Yeah, maybe not trying to match that materials, but to do just that, show something different with material. Good point taken.
Any further questions? Okay, thank you.
No, thank you very much. Thank you. I'm going to leave it on the very nice rendering first. Get one more good look. There you go. Thank you.
Good evening, Ann Hamilton presenting case number 23-45 for additions and alterations at 431 33rd Street. As the applicant stated, this was continued from the August Historic Preservation Board meeting to explore different options rather than a two-story addition to the rear. And as you've seen, the applicant has revised to a one-story. This is the current existing conditions on the site. As you can see, they've added those shutters over the front door and side windows, some neighboring homes. So the proposal is now for an addition of one story of approximately 1,124 square feet to the rear of the home, and then those replacements of windows and doors to impact and alterations to the front facade to remove the non-historic slat windows and door. This is the proposed site plan. As you can see, all of the additions are to the rear of the existing structure. The existing floor plan and the proposed roof plan, the existing elevations, and the proposed, where you can see the entire addition is set to the rear. The west elevations, north and east. And the streetscape, the home at 427 is a one-story, and 441 is a two-story. So this obviously fits in between those two heights. And here's the rendering that the applicant provided, and the rear rendering. We believe this does meet the applicable codes and the Secretariat standards. And we are recommending approval with that condition that the applicant referenced. When that condition was written, I had not seen the rendering that was provided today. I think that if the project looks like the rendering, I would be fine with eliminating the condition. If it's going to look more like the elevations, I think that the roof and the height needs to be restudied. But with the applicant's guarantee that it'll look more like the rendering, I'm okay with eliminating this. So, thank you.
Thank you. Questions of staff? Okay, thank you. Do you have any members of the public that wish to comment on this project? Okay, seeing none, we'll go into executive session. Any discussion, or would someone like to make a motion?
I'll just add that I do feel like the rendering is convincing in terms of the gable condition, as Ms. Hamilton mentioned. So I don't feel like that needs to be a condition based on the evidence provided. And it sounds like we're looking at two conditions at this point. One, an expression in the cladding of the addition to differentiate the old from the new, and then also a consistent railing design, which I think would be fine if staff just reviewed that once the selected one is made by the applicant.
Okay.
I move that the Historic Preservation Board approve application number 23-45 for additions and alterations in accordance with standards 9 and 10 as set forth in section 94-49, the city's zoning and land development regulations. The motion is based on the testimony presented along with the application submitted and the staff report, which constitutes competent substantial evidence. In addition, the approval of this request is made conditional upon the following restrictions, stipulations, and/or safeguards that I move are necessary to ensure compliance with the purpose and intent of the Historic Preservation Ordinance, the Historic Preservation element of the Comprehensive Plan of the City of West Palm Beach, the Secretary of Interior Standards for Rehabilitation, and the additional criteria set forth in section 94-49 of the city's zoning and land development regulations. The conditions include the following. 1, an expression and cladding at the addition to differentiate the old from the new. And 2, the applicant select a consistent railing design, which will be approved by staff.
We have a second.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion carries, project approved, and thank you so much for working with us on the addition and scaling it down from 2 stories to 1. We really appreciate it. Thank you. Good luck. Our next project is case number 23-57, 421 28th Street.
Would you like to just put up a photo of the house for that?
Yep. Hello, Elliot Stultz. I'm here on behalf of Allison Kohlmeyer, who is the owner of the house. She is proposing 2 things. I was not here for the initial presentation, so I'm not quite sure what the discussion entailed, but the first thing she's proposing is to replace the existing windows with impact windows with a mullion configuration similar to the existing windows. She's certainly willing to take direction from the commission or from the staff to the extent there's feedback on that proposal. The second thing that she is proposing is to replace the existing screens on the front of the house with solid panes of impact glass to protect the interior of the porch, to provide for a longer season during which she can use that space, and again is seeking direction from the commission and the staff on that point.
Okay. And she's aware of staff's recommendation, correct?
I don't know if she's aware. I think I don't fully understand the recommendation, so perhaps if someone could share that.
Yeah, so I have spoken to the homeowner. She did inform me that a neighbor would be speaking on her behalf, so she is aware that the recommendation is denial. At least that's what she had expressed to me over the phone.
And is there a reason? I mean, is there something she could change that would be?
Well, I'll get into that in the staff portion, but
Okay.
generally we just don't recommend porch enclosures as a rule.
Okay, what about the windows, though, and the rest of the house?
Yes, replacing the windows in the rest of the house with impact is fine.
Okay.
And I'm happy to work with her on that.
Okay.
But is that before us today or just the porch enclosure?
Just the porch enclosure. The window replacement, I think, is reasonable enough that it can be done at a permit level.
Okay, great. Okay, questions of the applicant?
Yes, you're enclosing the current screen enclosure with what type of window is your proposal?
I would have
Are
to
they
defer to
like
you.
a-
I'm afraid I don't know, but my understanding is that it was a single pane
With
with no mullions.
dividers, just casement?
So my understanding, at least on the floor plans that were provided, was it was going to be single hung windows.
Single hung.
That's what it had been indicated. I can double check, I guess.
And I believe it was even tinted to have a similar color to the screen. I don't know.
That would have been for sure. Yeah, so on the floor plan that was provided, which is in your packet, it does say single hungs on all windows.
Any further questions of the applicant? Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. Ann Hamilton presenting case number 23-57 for alterations porch enclosure at 421 28th Street. This lot is in the Old Northwood Historic District. The home was built in 1949. As you can see here, currently there is a screened-in front porch that, although it is screened in, still reads very open to the street and not as a portion of the home. The request is for alterations, specifically to enclose those porch windows. The applicant was also requesting to replace other windows with impact. That seems like a fairly standard request as long as it is replacement like for like. However, to replace the screened-in porch with single-hung windows requires board review and is generally not supported. Here are some interior photos from our real estate listing of what that space looks like. We believe that this does not meet the applicable codes and are therefore recommending denial, as generally porch enclosures are not supported in most cases. Any questions?
Are the original windows on the property casement windows? Is that what I'm seeing in the pictures?
That's what it looks like, yes.
So do you have any concerns about that? And it looks like the one in the porch actually might have a picture window with casements on
Yes,
either side.
Yes, I believe the one in the porch is a picture window with casements on either side. We would want that to be replicated exactly. Obviously, when I was speaking to doing the replacements at a permit level, that would involve replacing like for like. So that would require them not, changing from the current opening styles.
Okay. Any questions of staff? Okay, thank you.
I actually have, sorry, a little bit late to the microphone. I know that in my time on the board, it's been pretty standard across the board that we do not support enclosing porches, particularly screen porches, on the front of a property. And my question is just related to the Secretary of the Interior Standards, just for the applicant's understanding of why they're typically denied. And I just wanted to get your perspective. For me, I'm looking at, let's see, Standard 9, which talks about the spatial relationships that characterize a property. Do you feel like that is the standard that best applies to the denial recommendation, or is there another standard or criteria that you're citing generally?
No, I think it is the spatial relationships of the opening. To replace these openings with single hung windows no longer reads as an open porch. It reads as an enclosed room. I think, in my memory, the only time I can remember approving a porch enclosure would be with plate glass windows only. Certainly not single hung windows, certainly nothing tinted to look like screens, and that's the only case that I can think of that we've allowed it. But it also, it creates a greenhouse effect on the front of the home. It's not very energy efficient. The design guidelines really recommend against it in general.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do you have any members of the public that wish to comment on this project? Okay, seeing none, we'll go into executive session. Any discussion? Would someone like to make a motion? Definitely think there's not much to this house, but certainly the porch is a very strong character defining feature.
I move that the Historic Preservation Board deny application number 23-57 for 21 28th Street for alterations porch enclosure. The motion is based on the testimony presented along with the staff report that constitutes competent and substantial evidence of record has not been submitted that satisfies the standards set forth in the Historic Preservation Ordinance, Section 94-49 of City's Zoning and Land Development Regulations. The Secretary of Interior Standards for Rehabilitation, specifically Standard 9.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. The motion carries, the application is denied, but we encourage you to ask the property owner to work with staff on the replacement windows, which of course, that's something can be approved at a staff level. But we would like to see, I think, casement windows specifically for those windows on the front, but staff can work with you on that. Thank you. Our next case is 22-8721 Cayuga Drive.
Hello again, everybody. I'm Sam Fish. We're here at the request of staff to update the board on our findings in the demolition of the property at 721 Cayuga Drive, which was a demolition of a portion of the home and then a construction of an addition, new construction addition. In the course of the demolition of some of the walls, the company, the demo was overstepping the scope or overstepped the scope of what the proposed demolition was. They demolished certain walls that were found out to be wood frame walls, and also some masonry walls that were not properly able to be supportive. Natalie can go into some of the more specifics, which are in the report as she detailed here on the floor plan. The materials that we were to retain, such as some of the iron columns for the front of the home, were kept. Currently, in the state, our building plans can be accomplished as they are. We don't have to change any of the building plans in order to build what we propose. We had asked staff to administratively approve the additional demo or the building plans as they are, and her request was that we were to update the board to some of the additional demolition that occurred to some of the walls that were proposed to stay. This wasn't something that was intentional. This was something that was exceeding the scope of the demolition. It was, quite frankly, it was a lack of some supervision on our end of it for properly informing the company doing the demo. And so, it is obviously something that we're taking responsibility for. And we're here to ask that administratively that this can be approved as it sits so that we can complete the home with no changes to the original set of plans that we do have.
So here what we are looking at is a breakdown of the current condition of the home and then the areas of the walls that were removed and why they were removed. I'd like to start with the walls that are highlighted in red. So those are currently standing today on site. The walls highlighted in purple are part of the original home, and those were found to have spalling rebar. So meaning the internal support of the masonry units must have had water infiltration over the years and were no longer able to support the proposed second story. The best way to salvage spalling rebar is to chip out the masonry units, which means we would be losing significant portion of those walls in order to repair that steel and essentially reform and pour that backside of the wall. The areas in both green and orange were part of the addition of the home, so that is not original to the structure. The areas in green also had spalling rebar. Excuse me, I misspoke. The areas in purple did not have filled cells. So some did not have filled cells and some that had filled cells were spalding. The area in green had spalling rebar, which again, in order to repair would require significant demolition of the CMU units in order to repair them. And then the areas in orange were wood framed. They were originally expected to be masonry, and they were found to have significant termite damage and water damage. And on the next slide, we have some photos that just highlight some of the conditions that the demolition company found, which is when they, took the liberty to remove the units. So this photo here is a good example of the rebar. You can clearly see it's corroded. It's not even standing up straight. All these photos. Here's a photo of that steel inside of the masonry. As you can see, it's actually corroding away at that concrete. Down at the bottom, you can see the bottom plate of that wood frame wall, clearly not able to support a second floor as was proposed. Next, you can see all of the cells along the house are hollow. That part of the house is actually built up on a stem wall, and none of that stem wall is filled. Some more photos of a tie beam that has spalling rebar. You can kind of see it's exposed up in the right corner. And again, down at the bottom, additional hollow cells. So yes, what Sam said, we are here to provide you with an update as to the current condition, what was found when the work started, and what is remaining. We are fully confident that with the plans provided by the structural engineer, we can still achieve the approved proposal. There will be no changes to the final product.
Okay, thank you. Questions of the applicant?
Was there a structural engineer involved?
Yes.
And that was submitted for permit?
Yes.
What was the plan for adding the second story?
So we had to do investigation to find out of the integrity of the existing walls, and essentially, I believe, don't quote me on this, every 14 inches we had to have a filled cell. And if there was not a filled cell, we'd have to fill it. The challenge with that, again, we'd have to chip away at most of the wall in order to fill that cell. And the additional challenge with that is that the house is built on a stem wall. So the foundation that the wall sits on is hollow too. So in order to fill a stem wall, that's like another animal as well. Not only you have to get the wall solid, you have to get the foundation below grade solid as well, which presents a significant challenge.
Any further questions of the applicant?
Do you have a superintendent on site? I mean, I know that you stated that you're taking responsibility and you understand that there is a lack of supervision. You guys have a lot of projects up around the city. You know, I think that you definitely need to take responsibility for the power that you have in terms of our city and the way that you're helping to shape it. And, you know, I remember the approval for this project. With historic projects, you need to have a superintendent who is on site making sure these things don't happen. I mean, this significant loss of historic material will never get back. And when you're talking about we can still carry out the same plans that were approved, I understand what you're trying to say. The reality is that it's a completely different set of plans because there's almost nothing left of the historic structure.
So to answer your first question, 100%, there is a superintendent dedicated solely to this job. A series of unfortunate events. He was out with a medical emergency. I was also in the hospital. Perfect storm. Not justifying it, it's just what happened. The demolition company was instructed to mobilize and not touch the house. They were instructed to start on vegetation, basically setting us up to stage the site so we can have room for our dumpster, have room for our equipment, and that just didn't happen. And yes, I hear what you're saying. This is a different house because the materials that should have been salvaged are not salvaged. I do believe that had we started a meticulous, slow demolition of the home, we would have been right back here talking to you, saying, we don't think this can be done, unfortunately, with the condition of the walls that they're in. I wish that we could have proactively been here having that conversation rather than retroactively coming back and saying, this happened. But I do believe we would be in the same boat just due to the structural integrity of the home.
And we'll never know that because we have nothing to see.
Sure, absolutely. I'm happy to provide additional photos if that helps. The demolition company at least took a lot of pictures. So I have hundreds of photos I'm happy to share if that helps. But yes, we understand that what should have been salvaged is not salvaged.
From my knowledge, is the applicant self-reporting this, or were you instructed to report?
We were instructed to report.
You
by
were
staff.
instructed to report, okay.
By staff, yeah.
At what point did you realize that this was occurring, or that this happened?
So this all happened within 24 hours, the one day that I was out. And I believe a neighbor called and notified staff, who notified the building department. So the building department's involved. There's a red tag on the property, so we're handling those violations outside of this meeting. And we spoke with staff, and she advised that, the best path forward was at least to come here and provide you all with an update. So that's what we're here to do.
Thank you.
So going to the, your sheet isn't identified, but it's the current conditions sheet.
Mm-hmm.
The photograph on the left, is it safe to say that that is the kind of the existing, the bay window that was to the side of the covered carport.
Yeah. He's talking about.
Yeah, I don't want to misspeak.
Sorry?
I said I don't want to misspeak. I do have all the photos labeled back at the office. It does look like it's one of these columns that is still standing.
No. It looks like that column, and then it looks like the window. Oh. I don't know if everyone's following me. The window light, that elevation looks to be the elevation that was most going to be recognizable in your proposed.
Yes, I understand what you're asking. So this photo on the left
So it's like a
is this right here.
little miracle that portion of the wall remained, which is the one portion of the wall that your proposal had the integrity to keep.
Correct.
Because honestly, I think that the proposal really didn't do anything to highlight the historic nature of the contributing structure, in my opinion. I remember when this came before this board. That said, now that you're kind of free of the confines of the perimeter of the walls, is there a better plan that your team has come up with? Maybe one story, now that you're not bounded by walls that no longer exist?
No,
Put it in addition?
we're actually very happy with the final approval. We, spent many months here in front of you and listened to all of your advice, and I feel like we accommodated a lot of the requests and ended up with a result that we're happy with and proud to contribute to the Flamingo Park community. So we'd like to continue with the original approval.
Any further questions? Okay, thank you.
Good evening. Ann Hamilton presenting an update to case number 22-80 for additions and alterations at 721 Cayuga Drive. This property is located in the Flamingo Park Historic District. You saw this case come back a number of times. I have a timeline a little bit later in the presentation, but most recently, I believe the approval was given in November of 2022 for the proposal that I'll show you in a bit. However, on October 4th, I did receive a call from a neighbor that there was extensive demolition done on site, and currently this is about what remains of the contributing structure that was once here that I showed you a minute ago. As you can see, the house prior to demolition wasn't in the best condition. However, the proposal did indicate retaining most of the walls and reusing the building as it existed. This is the current site condition, where you can see mostly that front bay window portion, and a few of the columns from the carport are remaining. However, pretty much everything else of the building was demolished prior to the building inspector stopping work on the property. The front door is remaining, and not much else. And you can see the what the applicant was showing, that there clearly was some problems with the walls, but it's hard for us to know without those walls currently existing. This was the proposed demo plan, which again showed in red all of the walls that were to remain. And this is the existing conditions, where really only the front small portion and carport were retained. This work was all done prior to the issuance of a building permit. Historic had not signed off on their final permit, Therefore, any work that was done without the issuance of a permit. Although they did go before the board, obviously for approval for this project, it far exceeded the scope of what was originally presented. This was the proposed site plan, ground floor plan. Again, you can see most of those walls marked in red were intended to be retained. This is also the set that was provided in the building permit. So the applicant, at least in their building permit, represented that all of these walls were to be retained and built on. And the second floor plan, this is the approved elevation. As you can see here, that portion of the home that was called out was probably the most prominent portion of the home to remain. But there were still some walls that we were supposed to retain. Just a quick timeline. Originally, in January 2022, the applicant came before you for case numbers 2206 and 2207 to completely demolish the home, split the lot, and construct 2 new homes. This was denied by the board. They then came back with the approval that I just showed you. That was heard in August of 2022, September of 2022, October of 2022, and November of 2022. It was approved at the November 2022 meeting. The applicant did submit for building permit in May of 2023. I will say pretty close to getting it issued. When they did the work prior to receiving the permit on October 4th, it seems their crew came in and demolished most of the walls. The building department did cite them on October 5th for complete demolition of the home without permits. And also, Historic did add demolition by neglect, since that's our main code section that we can cite them for. As you can see here, these are the 2 sections of the Historic Preservation Code that they were cited for, which is 9448E. Maintenance and repair of designated properties required. All designated properties, which this is a contributing structure or any portion thereof, shall be preserved against decay and deterioration and kept free from structural defects. I believe that demolishing the structure probably doesn't fall under that. And then 9452, which is enforcement and penalties. And so we are seeking board guidance essentially on how to proceed with this application, as the application that was submitted for the permit documents in staff's view is no longer valid because walls that were intended to be retained are no longer existing. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions of staff?
I have a quick one. I just want to make sure there wasn't a separate demolition permit that was issued, right? There was just no permit.
No,
active
so
at the time.
it was just the demo plan that was included in the addition application.
Okay.
And thank you. I don't understand what you mean by you're seeking guidance from us.
Well, essentially, I don't feel comfortable administratively passing this permit and approving them to do construction of the new addition, given that that permit includes, again, adding on to a building that, for the most part,
No, it
doesn't
should be more
exist.
specific. Clearly, their original COA isn't valid. So wouldn't the guidance be them coming back for approval for a complete demolition from this board and revesting the plans?
Or the board could approve them, rebuilding, the portions of the walls that were demolished as existed, and adding on to them as if they were like the previous contributing structure.
Did this update get advertised in the newspaper and given mailing notice?
It was advertised in the newspaper. It did not have a mailing notice. It's not being reheard as a case. I'm just seeking guidance.
You had alluded in answering his question. Let's say there was a windowless wall, it's concrete block and rebar, so that essentially could be replaced as it was. So would you be able to tell me what other kind of significant original materials were lost? Were there windows, original doors, that kind of thing that were lost as well?
I believe most of the windows and doors on this property had already been replaced. I don't think there was, the original owner did actually appeal to the city commission to replace their original windows and doors on this property, so I know for sure that those weren't original materials. And the applicant has indicated that some porch railings and columns and things like that were retained during the demolition. But no, beyond the walls that you see there, I'm not aware of any other significant materials that were kept.
Okay. Yeah, kind of like to be a devil's advocate here. So if we're just talking, there are original materials and original materials. If you're talking about doors, windows, columns, that's one thing. If you're talking about essentially a concrete block and rebar, which is exactly the same as it was 75 years ago, that's a different story to me.
On an unrelated case, Ms. Hamilton and I spoke earlier this week, and just to kind of go back to that conversation in terms of best practices for historic preservation, when you're talking about removing historic materials, even if it's an exterior wall, a piece-by-piece replacement is the best practice versus a wholesale demolition. And I feel like part of that, and maybe Mr. Sheldon can weigh in as well, is that you're assessing piece by piece the fabric instead of just looking at it overall and saying, I can't do anything with this. And that leads to retention of more historic material. I know that I personally have worked on a lot of historic buildings. They all have different conditions, and no historic building is necessarily perfect, right? So there's all these trying to bring it up to code. There's soil that has come up on a building and then water that's damaged it. There's so many different ways to approach creatively and structurally solutions to these problems without this large-scale demolition. I know that that's been my experience. Mr. Sheldon, I'd be delighted to hear, your experience as well.
Sure. Well, every one of these conditions can be remedied. And just like you said, piecemeal would be best practice in this situation. I was curious about the engineer and what the plan was going into this, and you did verify that there was some investigative work done. That to me would help identify that the foundation was hollow, the stem walls, that there were wood walls on one of the elevations. So I'm a little confused as to what the real issue was here. Was it lack of supervision that day? Was it not enough investigative work being done? This could have been avoided.
Are you asking a question, or is that just a?
So I guess I would like to follow up on that a little bit and say, like, if the investigative work was done, there was a plan to remedy this. What was identified and what wasn't? Because this is all being presented that it was found out after it was removed.
Right. So not the best answer, but it's the truth. Again, it's a perfect storm. So the level of investigative work prior to submitting an application is minimal. We go in with an understanding of what the original structure is. It's CBS, single-story home. Structural engineer provides, I guess, a guideline for what the structure will need to be in order to achieve the final result. So you have to have a number 5 rebar every, 14 inches, and if it's not there, add it. But the only way to add it in certain cases is to chip out so much of what's already there. And I agree with you. A piece-by-piece assessment of, hey, on this wall, we can take this approach. On this wall, we can treat the rebar. We actually don't even need to remove it. We can treat it, leave it in place, and refill that column. We, as the general contractor, weren't even given that opportunity to have that discussion. And I'm not saying that's right. I'm just saying that's what happened. But yes, in a perfect scenario, we could have stopped, taken wall by wall. Okay, is there a way we can remedy this wall? Is there a way we can remedy this wall? And unfortunately, the contractor on site that day, saw the conditions, said this can't be used, and took it down.
And this was a demo contractor?
Correct.
That's all they do?
It's a subcontractor of ours, yes.
So why would it be in their interest to remove more than what they're being paid for? If there was, just a couple of walls to be removed. I don't understand how they kept going and going.
I honestly don't understand either. I really don't. And there's a separate conversation, being had with them. And again, just to follow up on a little bit of what Ann said regarding the permit. So on the new EPL system for civic access, Historic actually signed off on the permit on August 9th. Building failed it and requested an additional clarification on our roof framing plan for that front gable roof or flat roof. There was a discrepancy on the plan submitted between the gable and the flat, and the board requested the flat roof be submitted. So we had to update the detail, resubmit that to building. Building actually signed off on it, but I guess the internal systems of routing, it got routed back to Historic. The EPL also provides a due date. So the contractor can go in and see, okay, my review is going to be completed on this date. We were given a date of September 20th. Doing the best we can to plan and be proactive, we had lined up our demolition contractor for September 28th. So a week after we had expected to receive the permit to mobilize. They ended up mobilizing on the 4th, which is the day that all things bad have to happen. And here we are. But again, like the vice chairperson said, our reputation in the community, both in historic and non-historic neighborhoods, is of utmost importance. We're running a lot of projects with a lot of staff members, and we really, really, really care about doing right by the city, which is again why we did come back to the board so many times and heed your recommendations and make every effort to design a product that we'd be happy with and you'd be happy with. So we'd be, really disappointed to not see that through. We understand the conditions aren't ideal. We understand that this should not have happened, and we're not sitting here trying to justify it. We were right by doing it. We weren't, so that's not what we're here to say. We're just here to provide you with an update and hopefully, allow Ann to feel more comfortable moving forward. We are still handling our own violations and penalties with the building department separately for what happened, and we just want to, again, build a beautiful house in Flamingo Park and make everybody happy.
So the city attorney's office here, Ann and I discussed this prior to this meeting, and I think one course of action the board could take was to request the applicant to resubmit the application. Basically, the application they submitted is based on information which is no longer good. So that's one path that the board could take.
We're in the staff report right now. Thank you, though. Any further questions of staff?
And I just wanted to say that, I'm the person least versed in demolition and construction here, but not to be funny, but when you go into surgery, the surgeon actually marks which leg, which arm, whatever. When property is going to need to be cleared and there are trees that need to be saved, they put a big X on them. Why isn't something like that done in demolition? I mean, by the applicant.
I mean, I would hope, obviously, once permits pass our desk, it really becomes the purview of the building department whether the plans that are submitted in the permit are followed. But I would hope for any historic projects that applicants are making very careful notations of what should and shouldn't be demolished in the hopes that we aren't losing contributing material. Certainly.
Thank you.
Thank you. I have one public comment card, Linda Cullen. And for those of you who don't know Linda was chair of this board when I started.
I'd like to be here on a more pleasant note. Occasionally I do that. Linda Cullen, 828 Biscayne, Flamingo Park, president of the Flamingo Park Neighborhood Association. And I know that you are all very familiar with 734 Ardmore, which is in Flamingo Park. and now 721 Canuga. So I started thinking, well, we're disappointed, but now I'm beginning to think we're outraged. So I was wondering what the plan would be. You can't just wave your wand and have this house magically go back the way it was. I don't know what the hell the plan could be. I heard them ask for an allowance to demolish the rest of the structure. I feel like there's a movie that maybe all of you have seen, or I've seen at least, which is where something magically just unfortunately gets demolished. And that leaves an open slate. In January of 1922, the applicant made an application to demolish this house, split the lot, and build 2 houses. And it wasn't recognized until I came to that meeting and said, you can't do that, this is a contributing property. So the applicant has known that all along. My greatest fear now is that if suddenly the rest of this is demolished, something else is going to be there. I want to admonish you and beg you that if they build something here, forgive me, that it goes over the lot line so that this property cannot be divided. So please keep that in mind. I would also say when the letter, when this was approved, when the current plan was approved, was in last January. It's almost a year. And on the letter it says, please be advised that if your plans change from what was represented in your application, you must first notify historic preservation so we may respond with the impact of change. So that wasn't done. It is hard for me to believe that somebody buys a property like this, wants to put on a second story, doesn't get a structural engineer to see if there's any problems with the foundation, any problems with the walls. And they haven't said that that has happened. So first, please, whatever happens, do not let 2 houses be built and this lot separated. Whatever happens has to go back in the same footprint that they applied for, the same footprint that was there to start with. Beyond that, I tried my best to go into the code today and look for, can I have 1 minute? To look for remedies and fines. I can't think of the words that I want, okay? And far be it from me tonight to be able to tell you what I think they are. I know they're in code somewhere. Maybe they're not a definitive amount, but I would ask you, if you continue this case, to discuss this with legal, to discuss it with the building department, to discuss it with code, to see what remedies there are for this process that needs to have some financial repercussions to it. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Linda. Do you have any other public comment? Okay, would you like to make a rebuttal?
I think we would like to clarify that our request is not to demolish what is remaining. We would like to leave it in place. We agree with James that, the portion that is remaining is actually the most profound piece of the original home, and we would like to honor it and keep it as a part of the original building. We are not asking to redesign. We are not asking to deviate from what was approved. We are looking to move forward with the approval and no further demolition, maintain what's there. And then I did just have a question for legal. The plan that was submitted on a structural level, I know we keep going back to that, actually reads to allow us to move forward without resubmitting. No, I guess what I'm trying to say is no structural change has to be made. The engineer provided us with guidelines for what those walls needed to be. So if the existing walls did not meet those conditions, we had to bring the existing walls up to those conditions. But we could also just build new walls that meet those conditions, if that makes sense. So I don't believe any part of our plan has to change at all.
And also something I'd like to add, when we originally went in for the lot split and for the new homes, that was at the suggestion of the previous homeowner as well as the support from staff. That wasn't something that we had proposed, unilaterally. It was supported by staff, and when it was brought to our attention that the neighborhood did not support splitting the lot and building 2 new homes, that they preferred a single home be left on the lot with a renovation, we went back to the drawing board and we designed a home that we felt fit the neighborhood, was at what the neighborhood wanted, and certainly what the board and what staff wanted. And we didn't even pursue any other remedies or any other action. So we're not asking to demolish the original structure that's there now. We're not asking to split the lot. Anything that, to that effect is not what we're here to do. We're here to build the original house per the original plans that we have. The demo plan would obviously not be exactly the same, but as Natalie said, we have structural details that detail exactly how the walls are supposed to be. If the walls were not, up to that structural integrity, they can be built to the structural integrity with new concrete block and steel. As you said, the original block won't be the original block. It will be new concrete block, but there are no ceiling details or window details or any doors or anything specifically historically designated, or any materials that are historic materials other than the concrete block, and walls that were wood frame walls versus concrete walls that are needing to be replaced.
Okay, thank you. So I think part of the earlier, this is a question for you, Melissa. Part of Ann's earlier presentation, I don't think we have it in here, but for a loss of the building, it can be referred to a special magistrate, correct?
So Ann and I discussed this. There are several matters pending before the special magistrate having to do with this property. So they've actually been cited by code enforcement, and those are going to be heard.
By the special magistrate?
Yes.
Okay,
They
so that's already going to happen regardless of what decision
Correct.
you make tonight?
Correct.
Okay.
I think it's appropriate to have the applicant start over. I think it's appropriate because the information is no longer valid. They submitted a building permit, the information has changed, and I think that it would be appropriate and within this board's authority to ask the applicant to start over, if the board chooses.
Well, since this is an update, is it really an actionable item before us?
Well, I think they've been noticed, but, so they were given notice of this hearing, it was advertised, and so I think that given where we are, which is that there is a pending building permit application, it's going to come to Ann for review. She does not feel, given the events that have happened in the last 2 weeks, that she can rule on it because there are changed conditions. So I think it's within the board's power at this time to say, given what has happened, you need to start over, you need to reapply. And yes, I think you can do that at this meeting. I'm not sure why you couldn't. They were given notice, it was advertised, it's within your power. Yes, I think you can do that.
Okay, thank you.
Why don't you go ahead and say?
Just another note on the legal matters. Our mailers are actually always courtesy mailers unless a demolition is involved. We do send them out to property owners for additions and things like that, but we're not legally required to. The only thing that we're legally required to send out mailers for is demolitions.
Okay. Well, I think that further speaks to the fact why this needs to go back, because the neighbors were never noticed of a demolition. So, any further discussion? So you need a motion or just direction from us?
I think somebody should make a motion and the board should vote on it, yes.
Okay.
Could you clarify something? When you said they need to be notice of a demolition, you mean of a complete demolition?
Of any demolition.
Of any kind of demo at all?
Usually complete demolition, and I would say that what's occurred here is on the level of a complete demolition.
But regardless, sir, regardless, whether there was notice of a demolition or not, it's within this board's authority to ask you to start over.
So resubmit the same plan we already got approval on with a different demolition plan.
I can't tell you what to do. I can tell the board what they have the authority to do. It's within your purview to interpret that.
Well, colleagues, I think that this should come back as a new application for after-the-fact demolition and a regranting of the vested plans that were approved as part of the additions under the Secretary of Interior standards.
Is that your motion?
That's my motion.
Do you have a second?
Second?
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. And so you can work with staff to figure out exactly what that looks like. But I think the simple fact is that everything that we based our approval upon is no longer valid. So it has to restart and also get a retroactive approval for the demolition that occurred. Our next case is 23-59, 2416 Medina Way.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Dr. Russell Rosicki, architect, representing the interest of Robert and Sarah Hilmer, who are owner-occupiers at this address. This property is pretty unique. I'd just like to start by showing this photo. We have existing site photos. We have some design precedents to show you, and then we have the proposed plans. In some of these site photos, what you're going to most demonstratively see is this home is on a double wide lot. The lot's very large. The landscape buffer is tremendous. It's probably the most landscape buffer I've seen on any project I've been involved with as an architect. And that's been 15 years now. So as far as what we have is, again, double wide, 100-foot frontage. In the first structure you start to see is a garage, and then it steps up to what is the original structure that was built as a guest house to the property that's north of this. So it was a guest house, then they later added a garage. The guest house was originally built in 1941, give or take, right before the World War made its way to our homeland. So in terms of the investments made in the original structure, we planned at that time, from the 1941 date, we plan to actually retain that, even though this home is non-contributing. It does have a historical element to it, but the property, the home, is non-contributing. Again, it was the accessory structure to the property to the north. Right now, you're seeing the driveway entrance, kind of Chicago brick, making your way to kind of a parking plaza behind this gated entry where you gain access to the garage. Beyond that, there's a secondary gate and pathway through that leads you to the front of the home. Being south-facing, you can't see the entry from this view. This is the entry view looking north. The property, again, steps up from that single-story garage to the two-story original historical structure. The home's been added to so many times, and having consulted with the preservation planner behind me, Anne, and Frederic at the time, that it lost its historical value over the years based on all the additions. The additions were actually done quite well across the home. So substantially renovated, added onto. The property was subdivided. This is its own address, 2416 Medina Way. This is from the southeast side of the property looking northwest. What we see here is basically a third-story rising stair tower that leads to a rooftop deck. The kitchen being right where the kitchen and dining being right where this cursor is at the southeast side of the home. We have some cantilevered balconies that were done quite well. A cantilevered second floor, exposed rafter tails, Pecky cypress, barrel tile roofing, all the signatures of quality design, Mediterranean style home. This home in particular, unlike many other historical homes in the neighborhood, since it was built and added on so many times, it's constructed with concrete block, making it suitable for our proposal of expanding this third level. Here's a few more photos of the site. This is the garage on the left, the entry door on the photo to the right. This is the rooftop balcony. It's actually pretty well buffered line of sight. They only get a clip of, of the water looking northeast. There's new construction going up on the east of this property, as well as the west, as well as the northeast, as well as the southwest. This entire area is getting redeveloped, or let's say it's changing. I'd like to let Walter describe the design precedents and as they relate to this project.
Good evening. So as Russell briefly mentioned, one of the goals of the project is to actually expand the third story habitable space over that roof deck to make it a little bit more usable. There is also a proposal to extend the second story, which we'll get into shortly. Just want to briefly review some design precedents. I know third stories are not the most abundant thing, but they do exist in the neighborhood, and we just have a few examples to share briefly. So this one is the furthest, but it is larger than our proposal at 400 square feet approximate. This information is taken from Google satellite imagery, as well as the Google Street Views or our own personal photos. But again, the measurements are relying on the satellite. This is 211 Grayman, third story. This is on Flagler, another third story, almost 300 square feet. This one's close to the property at 380 feet away. Here's another one, a smaller third story on a Med Revival. A approximately 250 square foot third story on another Med Revival, approximately 400 feet away. This property is in limbo as far as whether or not it's contributing. Here's a contributing structure a little bit more than 500 feet away. I'm sure all are familiar with this old pineapple plantation. Very large third story on this. Here's a newer home that does have a third story in our opinion. It's just under 600 feet away, and it's a rather large, almost 800 square foot third story. And here is the original main home to this property that Russell was just speaking of. So again, our property to the south has the old guest house and garage. This was the original main residence, and it does have a third story, enclosed habitable space, just over 400 square feet.
In continuation, we'll start with the plot plan. What's unique about this property and the structure that's on this property as it relates to our proposed additions is that they're substantially set back. To the proposed second story addition, we have a 49-foot, 9-inch setback. This second story actually serves very well, you'll see in the floor plan shortly. Basically, right now, we have a single-story home with essentially two pop-ups that are separated by a roof, so there's no connection between the second floor on both sides. The addition as proposed at the second story makes for additional bedrooms. Currently, the home only has 3 bedrooms, and we're proposing to increase that count to 5. So in the second story addition, there's 2 bedrooms with ensuite bathrooms proposed, which also allows for a hallway to walk from one side of the home to the other, more customary to a 2-story home, and in this case, non-contributing, connecting to what I'm still in my mind saying is a contributing element, or at least a part of the historical part of the home. The other proposed 3rd story or loft level addition is 83 feet 1 inches from that front lot line. And I'll have renditions to show you how that appears as it is so far back. What I'd like to bring your attention to is on this front streetscape elevation, the property to the north of us, and actually all properties on this street, or I shouldn't say all properties, most properties on this street on both the east and west side of Medina are actually north-south orientation with their front entries facing the street. This home, 2416 Medina Way, uniquely with the 135-foot depth, 100-foot frontage, is actually east-west orientation. You don't see the front entry. So the home actually has a narrow, massing that you'd see presented to you, even when driving by or walking by. So that will be maintained in our proposal. Our demolition plan shows removal of the stairs and the stair tower. They're kind of funky. And we were kind of making the floor plan more porous to allow for more natural light within a very large open living room that doesn't have currently enough natural light to it. Feels a little cavernous. The second story floor plan, as you see, is biparted by kind of a rooftop and open to below section. So you're kind of stuck on one side of the home versus the other. On the left side of the home, again, is the original 1941 structure. At the loft level, this is the demolition we're proposing. Currently, you walk up the stair, you're at a wet bar, if you will. It's essentially rather small. It leads you basically directly out to the rooftop. The proposed design on the floor plan shows more natural light entering through proposed new windows. Basically at that stairwell, we've reconfigured the stair. We've added more glass. We've made sense of the windows and the spacing of the openings on the first floor. The second floor, you're seeing the proposed addition with the dark walls. You're seeing the 2 bedrooms with ensuite bathrooms. I made for a design that allows a hallway to gain access to the other side of the home. It being at a different elevation than the original structure, we have a series of steps that lead down, and you're kind of walking around this open to below, making your way to the west side of the home. So now the second floor is connected. The proposed addition on the 3rd story measures 18 feet 5 inches wide by 20 feet 5 inches long. It incorporates a full bathroom, smaller size bathroom. And essentially, we're calling it a lounge. It's a sitting area where they might be able to enjoy the rooftop a little bit more. We'll move on to the proposed elevations. You have existing stacked over the proposed. This is the front elevation. In our proposal, we are trying to make the garage more porous in line with the standards of making 2 sides open so that it counts as a carport, essentially offering more porosity to a pre-existing non-conforming front yard setback that is currently existing on the property. I'd just like to point out, too, the home also has a side yard non-conforming setback at the north side. Right now, it's approximately 4 feet per the survey. our proposed addition at the second story has a 10-foot setback. And you're getting kind of a peek you're still seeing that same stair tower. We're not elevating the roof with the proposed addition on the third level. We're actually reducing the ridge height just slightly with the replacement of the trusses and barrel roof. We've taken an average grade at the front of the home consistent with the city standards. It says the average grade at the frontage, essentially, of where the structure is, that being the highest grade, and taking that across allows us to maintain the maximum height as proposed at 30 feet to the mean roof height. Currently, the roof that's over the stair tower right now is just slightly higher. It's about 31 feet to the mean roof height. So our new proposal is to replace that roof to bring it in conformance at 30 feet so that the new addition beside it, obviously it's piggybacking on it. It just brings the home into conformance height-wise. This is the south elevation, and you're seeing essentially over this side of it, if you're looking at the mouse cursor, the addition forming its way adjacent to the original structure, the two-story portion next to the garage, and the stair tower that maintains its same size. We actually tried to detail that and transition from what was original by building out the stucco and then creating a reveal and dropping our roof plane. So our proposed roof that's adjacent to the old stair tower roof that's being replaced is actually going to step down even lower than the 30-foot mean roof height. In design, I wanted this to look more like a lofty feel, almost like an attic space, rather than a full-on third story. This being another good view, this actually faces Flagler, faces east. We have smaller windows up here that are getting kind of a peekaboo over the water. And I say peekaboo because the house to the east of us on Flagler is actually taller than this third story expansion as proposed. How is that possible? It's because it's in the flood zone. So they take it from the base flood elevation, or 2 feet above base flood elevation with the height. We've drawn a site cross-section. We've received the drawings from Frederique before she departed with the proposed home that's being built east of us. This dashed line indicates the mean roof height, and essentially as you carry across, the mean roof height of this new home is just higher, a few inches higher, I suspect. I can't say it's guaranteed, but within the realm of a few inches higher than what we are proposing, because it's on the flood elevation side, right? The flood zone kind of stops or kind of meanders around this existing structure on the east side. And then across the street, we've taken that dashed line and drawn essentially a cross-section of that other new home that was just built. What you're seeing here at the elevation above, the site section, is actually the north-facing elevation that faces the original structure. So these are the two archtop windows that allow more natural light on that north face. And then you're seeing the windows for the bedrooms and the windows for the bathrooms between. And the breeze block or the stack barrel tile at the carport. Here's our cross-section. We have a first-story ceiling height. It actually varies. The grade varies across the site. It starts up higher towards the west side, tapers down towards the east, as you can imagine, flood zone being more eastward. 8'10" ceiling height, first floor, 9'4" second floor, 8 foot proposed third floor. We went ahead and did a 3D sketch model showing the home. We've added shutters to all the windows to add more decoration to the home. It kind of yearned for it, in my opinion. This is it with a partial landscape ghosting the house, just to show you in terms of line of sight. This would, again, barely be visible from the west, essentially not visible from the east. It would be lower than the new home structure going up. And from the north, it's comparably massing in size to the original home. This is from the west view, or I should say northwest. looking southeast. With the carport structure, this would be the front facing to Medina, French door side lights, the second story addition, the original 2-story structure. And that concludes our presentation here.
Questions of the applicant?
Yes, Russell, thank you. Are you removing the roof to accommodate the new addition and reinforce it? Do you have a roof demolition plan?
Do I have a roof demolition plan? No, I don't. I do have a proposed roof plan,
Sure.
and that would signify a new roof.
Yeah,
over-
the section indicates a new roof. Yep.
Yes. That's the new hip roof over that third loft.
I'm referring to the second floor ceiling.
Oh, so you're asking if we have a cross-section through the second floor ceiling where there's a roof?
The modified rooftop deck, is that, how much of that second floor roof is being removed?
If I understand your question correctly, I'll go to the plot plan, which identifies areas. So the rooftop deck, it's an equal exchange, right? The proposed addition up here is 365 square feet. So that would be a subtraction of 365 square feet of that flat rooftop deck.
Can you speak more about staff's condition about the green bonus?
Yes. And I'm sorry for not stating that. We've made all updates to the drawings consistent with the recommendations from Anne. Specifically for green design, it's kind of been commonplace for us. Obviously, we were requesting that exception. At the same time, the standard for us in terms of green design, we tend to do more than 3, I guess would be the minimum standard for the green design request. So the first thing we do is we design or specify on the drawings Energy Star appliances. We specify, and this is captured in this green design notes, but I'm just summarizing it, low flow faucets, 2.0 gallon per minute faucets, same with shower heads, low flow toilets, 1.2 versus 1.6 gallons per flush. We also request that there's energy efficient lighting fixtures throughout. No incandescents, no halogens, and we would specify those fixtures on our plans. All new pavers, we request them to be pervious if they're exchanged or traded out adjacent patio, so that there's more infiltration of stormwater. We super insulate the building envelope that is proposed for the addition, so that in combination with the energy efficient mechanical systems, the zones can be efficiently designed with smaller size mechanical systems that actually reduce energy usage. And the solar heat gain coefficient, this not being a contributing home, would achieve the minimum standard for a new home, which would be 0.25 solar heat gain coefficient versus 0.4. Essentially, everything that's not street facing would receive low E for energy efficiency south facing.
And where's, I'm not familiar, I don't think we've ever seen a project like this, that you get an additional FAR for these
I'd have to look at the matrix, and Ms. Hamilton can speak to it, but I believe you can apply it either way. So it can be applied towards lot coverage or FAR.
Okay.
But again, I would want to refer to the matrix. I don't know it by heart.
Okay.
I do know in the past dealing with Ms. Mittner, when we've used it on our projects, some kind of demonstration of what applies as green building standards, it's always been extremely vague. And, likely as a board, we should, especially as a lot of these things become standard, people aren't really using incandescents as lighting. So is that going above and beyond warranting you additional FAR lot coverage? Probably not. Meeting what is required by code, again, probably not. Like with your, just bringing a building up to what is the minimum shouldn't, in my opinion, I don't think that was the intent of the additional bonuses. Other things that they've stated, I would say clearly are, but I do think as a board and also as being an applicant myself on occasion, understanding what qualifies for that and doesn't, we need to just solidify a bit more. I think that the list that they've shown here today in the past would have satisfied that requirement.
Thank you. I would actually agree with that statement. If that could be elaborated, it would be better for the design professional to achieve those standards, which I think, I'm LEED accredited. So if it's energy and efficient design, obviously I can stand by and promote that. But requiring a building to be certified obviously would be kind of an extreme measure for LEED or Green Globe. But if that became part of the measure, obviously it would further ensure compliance. But we did apply that green design special exception to the floor area. That allows for a 0.03 increase to FAR. And here you're seeing proposed FAR at 0.429. 0.40 is allowed, the special exception being 0.29 is our request.
Thank you. And then as far as the breeze block treatment on the garage, I think that's the first time I've seen that, and I just want to, do you have any historic precedent? I think I've seen it on perhaps terraces and things like that, but not in such a large application on multiple walls.
Yeah, great question. So if you've passed by 294 Cordova Road, Revival, that's the Lavin family owns it. In their carport, we used the same design. It was actually recommended by Frederic at the time because that was a carport, but it just didn't, it looked very shabby. So the idea was to make it look more consistent with the architecture. It was recommended by her to do the stacked barrel tile. At that time, I had sought approval for a specific type, recommended Pueblo stacked tile that was kind of a more decorative pattern of breeze block. She said, no, that really doesn't cut it. The homes that we have in El Cid typically use stacked barrel tile. The code allows for a lattice, an open lattice structure. So essentially, and we'd be amicable to that if that's what the board requested, instead of breeze block. I just think breeze block is more luxurious. It looks better, especially if it's consistent with the roof on the home. And it does allow the porosity, which you really can't enclose later, right? Because how would you mortar between stacked roof tile, right? So the lattice is in the code, and two sides being open on a carport, it makes that count as 50% of floor area, 50% as building footprint.
But it's going to have a garage door, right?
It does have a garage cover on the front, but it's open. It's just for the sake of security.
But is it still a carport if it has a garage door?
Still a carport. Technically by the code, and I would defer to Ann's opinion on that. With Frederic, it has. In conversation and consultation with Ann in describing this project, it was acceptable to her at the time we met in consultation on the subject. But as a matter of whether there's a garage door or not, I don't think my client, because it's beyond their second fence. I think if the board said, hey, there was no overhead door on that and we consider it a carport, I'm sure they would agree.
Okay.
Yeah, the calculation is based on how many walls are enclosed, and I feel like the lattice that's in the code is more the intent of that it's still open and more of an active space. I think that putting something that's so rigid like what is proposed here is not the intent of the code, and to me, that's a full enclosure of space. So I just don't think you can apply full enclosures on every side and take advantage of the calculation that way.
And if the code allowed a lattice, if it's a wood lattice, we would accept that. Breeze block is just a much lovelier look and more fitting to the neighborhood. We call it breeze block, stack barrel tile that matches the roof. It actually requires a lot of craftsmanship, which I think would be desired by the board, and has also been accepted on other applications that we have proposed it on.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions of the applicant? Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. Ann Hamilton presenting case number 23-59 for additions and alterations at 2416 Medina Way. This property is located in the El Cid Historic District. It is a non-contributing structure. It was originally a guest garage for the neighboring house at 196 Valencia. It was built probably in the 1930s. However, over the years, in the 1960s, it was split off from the property at 196 Valencia. That guest suite and garage had been added on to significantly. Main structure additions, that garage that the applicant is proposing to turn into a carport was added in the 90s. So although there is some historic material on this site, it is a non-contributing structure. The request is additions to the second and third stories of the home totaling approximately 1,048 square feet between the two levels, and that change of the current garage to a carport with breeze block walls. This is the site plan where you can see where the proposed square footage is being added and subtracted from that carport. This is the proposed demolition first floor plan. As you can see, that actual original space that was a guest garage, or guest suite and garage that would be located here is actually remaining fairly untouched. This is the second floor demolition plan. The applicant's proposal is to connect more of the second floor together. And then on the third floor, there is an existing small lookout area and fairly large rooftop deck. The applicant is proposing to expand to that upstairs third floor area and reduce the size of the rooftop deck. This is the proposed first floor plan, proposed second floor plan, which does include connecting those spaces with a stair access, and the proposed third floor plan. The elevations, which does show that inclusion of a barrel tile wall. If the board would prefer to see a lattice or completely open carport, I think that does fit better within the definition of a carport. I will say the applicant is correct. In the past, the department's general recommendation has been that this is acceptable, but I think for a more true definition of carport, it might not include a garage door. This is the south elevation, the east elevation, and the north elevation, and that roof plan. These are the renderings that the applicant showed of the project. We believe that this alteration does meet all codes, and are recommending approval with the conditions that all windows shall have clear glass with white frames and OG muntins, low E coating permissible only on non-street facing elevations. The second story addition shall be pulled back an additional 8 inches to comply with setback regulations, which the applicant has already done, and that the application shall provide more justification for the green bonus being applied towards FAR. In general, not opposed to the applicant using that bonus, particularly since they aren't utilizing any other bonuses. We do offer them for being one story or for constructing an accessory structure. However, site constraints, I think, would make it a little bit difficult for the applicant to construct an accessory structure instead to utilize that square footage. So I think it's a fair exchange to allow them to do the green bonus. Just was looking for a little bit more information on what exactly was being proposed there. And Ms. Kellogg is correct that you can apply it either towards FAR or towards lot coverage. It is something that we utilize not terribly frequently, but it is something that we have applied on projects in the past. Thank you.
Thank you. Can you put up the south elevation? Maybe I'm missing it, but I don't think it's in our packet. Does anybody have the, I think we just have the east and west elevation in our packet somehow.
Okay. Would that be this one?
Yes. Thank you.
In your knowledge, has this board ever approved a third story addition?
Off the top of my head, no. I can't think of any cases in the 2 years that I've been here.
Thank you.
And I'm going to continue that. Does this zoning district have a height limitation?
It is that 30 feet, yes.
And their proposed height is at?
30 feet.
And does the zoning district have a number of floors limitation?
No, we just measure by height.
I do want to just add to that conversation, because my understanding of this zoning, and I was actually just pulling the code up, A of the section talks about intent, and it refers to primarily 2-story and 1-story buildings. In my understanding, obviously code is open to interpretation, but my understanding, and also in conversations with various people at the city, is that the intent of this code, even though it's not specifically listed out, is relating to 1- and 2-story structures. So I just have significant hesitations about expanding on something that feels like a nonconformity. In addition, that it's not a contributing structure. It's a lot that's oversized. It just seems like there's other areas to put that kind of mass than something that substantially contributes, especially now that we're seeing this elevation for the south, that you have up to a pretty substantial change in the massing of the house.
And I think I will say, certainly if the 3rd story wasn't existing, it's not something that I would be recommending approval for. The only reason I think that it merited consideration is because there is currently a 3rd story element on the building.
Well, I guess that's what I was going to ask. What's the definition of a 3rd story? Because this is like a tower element.
And I'll agree with that. It is more of a tower element.
Well, can you go to the section, though? Because the section shows, yes. And, I mean, for me, exactly. So that shows 8 feet in height with a floor structure. I mean, it's an inhabitable space. It's a 3rd story.
Is it existing it is? It's a habitable space, or?
Oh, I don't know.
I think existing there is a small room there already.
And is what you're getting at that right now it feels like a tower feature versus a 3rd story?
Yes.
Yep.
But now with this addition, it'll read as a full
I agree.
3rd story.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been in this house many times. I don't remember that really being a usable space. It's like a pass-through to get to the roof deck. Any further questions of staff?
I am also looking at the zoning and land development regulations, but there is no definition for single family. So I think that that is the key here. If single family is not defined in the code, then it theoretically can have a third floor if they comply with 30 feet height.
And I would like to point out, this is a conforming structure. It's not a non-conforming structure. It was mentioned it was non-conforming. It is conforming. There is already 30 feet there. So I just wanted to clarify that.
Right, and I just want to be precise that I didn't say it's a non-conforming, I just said it feels like one.
Oh, okay.
So-
I just wanted to
Yeah, since we're just being particular, I just
clarify.
want to, exactly. Yeah.
Well, and your point was that historic properties are non-conforming because they exist prior to the modern-day building code, and so we often have to work with unique situations. And so I think that's what the point
Yes.
you're making.
They did say there's a legally non-conforming setback, though. Earlier in the presentation, someone said that.
Yes, I believe it's one of the side setbacks.
I'm sorry, we're in a, yeah, but if we want to ask that question, we'll certainly. Thank you. Any further questions of staff? Okay, I don't think there's anyone in the public. Okay, so we'll go into executive session.
Could we have that south elevation pulled up, Ms. Hamilton? Could we have the south elevation pulled up? Absolutely. Thank you. Well, I think the conversations that we've been having in the last several minutes relate to the new construction alteration standard about size, scale, bulk, mass, and volume. The physical size, scale, bulk, mass, and volume should be compatible with the surrounding buildings without overwhelming them. And I think that whatever we want to call it, but taking a tower feature and extending it into a third floor is not in conformance with that for the neighborhood. The applicant showed some precedent images, and I think that overwhelmingly, for one reason or another, there's significant differences with those. Either they're a contributing structure. I think the one on Pershing, was that built before the current code? The new construction, do you know?
Yes.
Yes,
That was
so-
built before the size, scale, and mass regulations.
Right,
That was
so-
like the poster child for why those were adopted.
So I think there's a lot of instances of that are being shown in the images.
Well, and I think that's also reflected in the creative use of the carport, right? They're having to open up to balance up the massing that's being placed at other parts of the building.
And with such a large lot, it just feels to me like there are better solutions for that mass if it needs to be added.
And even though it's not contributing, there's actually a lot of charming details, and I think that this third story addition detracts from the overall feeling of the building. Even though it has been added on to a lot over time, I think they've been very thoughtful additions. Not saying that this one's not thoughtful, just saying I just don't think it's most appropriate for the overall design of the house. Would anyone else like to weigh in?
I can try a motion. If there's no further
I know, no
commentary.
further discussion.
Ms. Hamilton, what is the next Historic Preservation Board meeting, the date certain?
Our next meeting will be on November 28th.
Thank you. So I'll try that up, the motion. I move that the Historic Preservation Board continue case 23-59 for 2416 Medina Way to the November 28th Historic Preservation Board meeting to restudy or move the massing of the third story addition to a different location.
Do you have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. Thank you. And I think we have you again for this next project. 23-60 and 23-61, 232 Grayman Drive.
Okay, good evening again. Again, my name is Walter Hyde. I'm representing Sue and Tom Garrity at 232 Grayman Drive. This is the only contributing Tudor-style house in a historic district in West Palm Beach, so I'm going to briefly go over Tudor style since everyone may not be so familiar with it. Tudors are primarily New England architectural style. It's not exactly the most appropriate for Florida. That's why you don't see a lot of them. Primarily, Tudors are going to be recognizable by a steep roof line that continues down to the first story, timber framing on the outset on the facade, large chimneys. They also tend to incorporate natural materials, overhangs, and archways. This is an additional graphic. Primarily just want to highlight once again that front-facing gable. Now, the steep roof gable is a form follows function situation. These are popular in the Northeast because there's a reason for large chimneys and steep roofs. We want to keep snow off of the house. We want to stay warm in the winter. Some typical features, just want to highlight a typical entryway. Our entrance that we'd like to actually restore is reminiscent of these first two images. Both single hung and casement windows are typical for the style. The house actually has both. So we're going to move forward. Palm Beach County does have other historical Tudors. This one specifically over across the intercoastal. This was the closest example I have to share with the board of a contributing historical Tudor. And this following image is just a sketch that kind of incorporates all of the Tudor elements that one might find on a Tudor-style house. So this particular house here at 232 Grayman, this is English Tudor revival with a little bit of a Mediterranean flair. The Tudor style has always been a little eclectic as far as borrowing from other styles. This home, as a brief background, has been sitting uninhabited for at least 10 years, likely more. The prior owner was living in the guest suite while attempting to undertake a large renovation to this property. The new owner is taking it over in quite a blighted state. It has elements demolished both inside and outside and deteriorating. Tom and Sue are from the Northeast, and they actually specialize in rehabilitating historical structures. They have a lot of experience in Massachusetts, and they are looking to relocate and maybe retire to a sunnier, warmer climate, and they see the potential in rehabilitating this property. One thing I want to point out before we continue from the front view is that there is an existing arcade type structure that is non-original that was added to this house. We'd like to restore the original entry, which pays a lot more respect to the Tudor style, which I'll get to in a second. Here is the typical large chimney that you would see. This home is mostly stucco and wood. These are the main two materials chosen to represent Tudor style on this home. The large, tall casement windows are appropriate for the Tudor style. We do plan on keeping everything we can. We're going to have a company like Austin Historical or similar come in and remove windows and doors, refurbish them, and bring them back. I will also point out an important part of the project is going to be fixing or changing this sunroom structure, which is also non-original. You can see the jalousie windows are in tough shape. The eave isn't exactly anything architecturally significant. Somebody just kind of slapped a sunroom on this house at some point. Here's another interesting element that we have to deal with. Someone decided to construct what I'm going to define as a sky bridge, which is a pedestrian connection between two structures, essentially creating it's larger than a hallway. It's a space that's usable between the two rooms, or between what used to be the primary structure and the accessory guest house. It clearly was never finished. We're going to get to this a little bit further on. You can see the deteriorated condition of the property. The owner was massing materials and not taking care of the pool. Here's that element again. This is a great picture of the former two-story guest house, which notably has a different roof material than the main structure. I'm going to get into a little bit later. I want to point out this condition right here. Someone tried to sneak in a bathroom above the stair, and they decided to cut out from the terracotta block. This is a double width terracotta exterior wall. So someone made a modification to the facade in order to try to squeeze in a window that didn't really fit. We plan to restore that. One of the conditions that Anne has actually proposed on the project is to keep the 3 sets of French doors, 2 in the front and 1 to the side, that contain this opalescent glass. If that's necessary, we're going to retain it. These doors are in tough shape. You can see some of the panes have been broken and replaced, but I was able to find this material, or hope I can actually procure what I saw online, so it does look like this may be something that we can fix. If there was any question in regards to the covered patio in the front of the house being original or non-original, you can see that somebody went ahead and put a beam right over the emblem that was originally over the front door. If you are able to, I don't want to slow down the presentation, but if I were to zoom in, you can see the original rafter tails that were above the roof that's at this pop-out entry that we'd like to restore. Here's the existing survey. It matches our drawings in the sense that front is down, so I apologize for some text being upside down, but Grayman at the bottom. As you can see, there are 2 driveways on the survey. I do assume that at one point in time there must have been some sort of garage structure over here. Otherwise there would be no reason to have that driveway. I presume, again, that there's no satellite imagery to support this, but it appears that someone removed that structure in order to put in a pool. So this project has quite a few unique features. In addition to being the only Tudor style, it's the only time I've ever seen someone attempt this skybridge type connector. And we know it's not original to the site. Sorry, I'm just trying to get this so you guys can see everything. Okay, so when the buyer was considering purchasing this property, they actually went above and beyond to have a sit down with staff to make sure they were going to be able to put in a garage. The owners collect classic cars, not too many, but they do have a few, and they absolutely need a place to put them. They were advised that it would be a feasible project, and they went ahead, moved forward with the purchase, and subsequently hired us to assist them with a very tasteful remodel and accessory structure that is the garage. So the first thing that we had to deal with was the consideration of this skybridge. While it potentially is feasible to try to keep it, it seems inappropriate. I feel it's quite offensive in its mass and its size, and it doesn't really serve a great purpose. It just makes everything awkward. So in order to successfully have a accessory garage structure on this site, we did need to maintain the connector between the former guest house and the single-family residence. We came back to staff with a proposal of an open loggia connector that would essentially maintain these 2 structures as the primary structure, which would allow us to propose this accessory garage. Furthermore, there is an existing carport that actually goes off the property by about a foot. So we have a pre-existing non-conforming side yard condition. If we were to try to attach to the primary structure for our garage, we would have to put all of the combined 25-foot side yard setback requirement to one side, leaving only 15 feet to work with, which does not work for a single car or for a 2-car garage. It could work for a single car, but we did a lot of exploration of doing an attached garage, and to be honest, it was just very unsuccessful. So I'm going to continue on, but before I do want to touch base briefly on the green design topic. Once again, this project is not achievable without that. So we're going to be doing similar things. For example, the mechanical code requires your mechanical system to be of a minimum 15 SEER. We would require 18 or better. All the appliances would require, we would like to see Energy Star appliances. We would like to see low flow plumbing fixtures. We will be specifying abundant insulation, more than the code requires. Other items like salt tolerant grasses so that we're not wasting irrigation water or potable water. Things of that nature we're hoping would be enough to obtain that extra square footage we need. This is the existing home. This is a really, really lovely house. Very tall ceilings on the first floor. There are currently no bedrooms downstairs, and the sunroom off to the side has high ceilings with exposed beams to match the living room. The original living room is just immaculate. It's amazing. The second story did leave some things to be desired. There are 4 bedrooms and 1 bathroom original to the home. This is the additional bathroom that somebody tried to squeeze in, but they created a life safety issue, in our opinion, with unsafe height at the stair. So our proposal is to, again, remove that sky bridge, bring it down to be a loggia to connect the 2 structures. We're proposing to relocate the kitchen, which requires a modification of the sunroom that staff feels was built sometime in the 60s. It is older. It's definitely not original to the home. We'd like to get a bedroom downstairs just for the ease of aging folk. Anybody who visits the home who maybe is not great with stairs has a place to stay. Upstairs, minor modification to the front bathroom and a proper bathroom in the middle that fits. A small laundry room will sit on a raised platform, which allows that stair to work. The roof essentially stays as it is at the main house. Here is the existing and proposed front elevation. So here we are restoring that front entry feature at the door. To speak to the accessory structure, we are again matching the Tudor style. We're going with carriage style doors, which would be more appropriate for the time. They'll function as overhead doors. We're going to match the timbering that's typical for Tudor, but also unique to this home. It has kind of its own flair, so we're going to do our best to mimic that on the accessory structure to keep with the style. Now, one of staff's conditions I would like to bring up on the front facade in relation to the sunroom. If you would note the fenestration on the main existing historical house, it's very light. There aren't any double windows. There are double doors. They are thin. The double casements are thin. There was a request to add more fenestration to the former sunroom to make it look more like a sunroom. But in our opinion, I think it's much more successful if it reads as a proper addition to a Tudor style, and adding more fenestration over here was distracting to the eye in the sense that you're looking at this single-story addition rather than the house. So I feel that this is a more appropriate solution, but I'm willing to work with staff and the board as necessary. We did add a railing to the second story because someone added a door. We're going to get back into that in a second. Here is the side facade. This would be the west-facing view. Here's that sky bridge. There is no fenestration in it on it either. There never was. There was a window on the other side. This side was blank. in our opinion, large improvement to move this down, make it an open porous type structure. Again, we're refurbishing the windows. You'll note that the existing windows have the security bars on them. We would be removing those. Here's that bathroom window that somebody snuck in there. We'd be fixing that. Again, all in all, we're trying to do a rehabilitation of what was here and improve upon it. This is the rear facade with the guest house superimposed as if you were the neighbor. This would be the view you'd get looking at the back of the house. Without the guest house in the way, formerly this is that sky bridge. We'd be reinstalling what we assume used to be an egress window in that bedroom right there, and enlarging this rear window at the kitchen to be an egress window for that new bedroom. We're gonna shrink the width of these rear doors and raise the height a little bit because we have the ability to do so. And in addition, touch up the cornice on the top of this former single-story sunroom addition. It currently just has 2 pieces of trim. It wasn't much of an attempt to make that look any kind of appropriate architecturally speaking, so we dress that up. I'll also note that our garage pays homage to the choice to have a thin soffit and small eave with exposed rafter tails. We're matching both of those things as well as the roof material on the garage structure. Here is the east facade, and here again is that guardrail I spoke of. So again, a staff condition was to remove this slider and make it French doors with side lights. So someone put this in. There's another life safety issue where somebody could end up on top of a roof and fall. So we really need protection on the event that someone walks out there for some reason, they do not fall. Just on the garage alone, here's the 4 sides. Just trying to add a basic architectural element of a stucco impression archway facing a potential future pool to mimic the arch windows on the houses and the archways of the loggia. The windows are going to be refurbished when and where possible if they're found to have been replaced, or if they will be installed at the garage. We will be using Sierra Pacific windows, which we can get with a wood cladding to match the original wood windows that are here. We'd be going with a Westlake concrete flat roof tile to match what the house has. Again, due to the lack of upkeep, the roof tile's in rough shape. Even when it's cleaned off, it's never going to appear to be the pure white that it maybe once was. So the garage is proposed to be a little mosaic of whites and off-whites that will do its best to match what the main house will have. So in addition to being here, because this is a historically contributing structure, there's also a variance element related to the project, and that is because connecting the 2 structures creates a variance for both rear and side yard setbacks. Now, we'll point out that the carport is currently a worse condition than the side yard setback that we're proposing to maintain, which is a 5 foot on the side, and it's 4.9 on the side and 4.8 at the rear. Those numbers are required to be 10 and 12.8 for a primary structure. Now, I would like to point out that if the board did not agree with the connector and the former guest house became once again detached, it would also be non-conforming because it's too large. it's 1,200 square feet and change. So it's larger than the required 1,000 square feet. So when we approached this project, we basically realized the conditions and the variables at hand, and we did our best to guide our clients into accepting what we feel is the least offensive proposal in order to achieve the project goals. Least offensive in nature, in our opinion, is to maintain the connector that almost nobody can see except for the one neighbor to the west, and maintain the setbacks that are already here. The garage as an accessory structure is completely compliant in all regards. So moving on to the variance component, there are lots of questions about the character of the neighborhood, if we're getting any special treatment, things of that nature. So this site plan portrays the site in red and all of the neighboring structures that have detached garages. Pretty much everybody that touches this site has a detached garage structure. Some have detached guest houses. I did not highlight those. These ones are just garages. I'll also point out that in the vicinity of this house, the neighbor definitely has a pre-existing non-conforming setback issue. Both of these corner homes have setback issues, pre-existing non-conforming. So we're not asking for anything out of the normal. I don't want to bore you guys and read this whole statement. Do you guys have my statements, and have you had a chance to read them, or should I read them in?
I don't think we need you to read them in.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. I think that's going to conclude my presentation for now.
Great, thank you. Questions of the applicant?
From the earlier photos that you showed, and having lived in the Northeast, this building to me appears to be more Tudor-esque than Tudor, and it almost looked like, being Florida, that somebody took a Mediterranean revival house and tried to make it into a Tudor house. So in that respect, if your applicant actually wants a Tudor house, are there elements that you can add to it to really, I know it wouldn't be feasible, here possibly, but, slate roof, those kinds of things. Additional exterior boards on some of those open spaces. You mentioned that you couldn't add more fenestration, but it seems to me like it needs something to make it look more Tudor.
Can I just interject for a moment?
Sure.
I'm just concerned that would create conjectural features.
Right, I thought that too.
And I really agree with what you're saying in terms of, is it a Tudor style? It's like a vernacular Tudor mission, and I think that that's part of what makes it special.
Okay. I thought you would say that. I just wanted
Okay.
to put that out there, okay?
I don't know how other people feel, but that was like my immediate reaction to this house. And I'm so excited to see it come before the board because
Okay.
it's been sitting in the state for a long time. So just an exciting project.
Yeah, that was well said.
Well, I'll ask a question. In regards to the roof material that's selected, were any other alternates considered, or was there any kind of study in terms of what was likely the original roofing material?
No, to Dan's point, I was aware that the Tudors typically do have slate or square concrete roofing tiles. This home had the square concrete roofing tiles. I looked to match them. I know that someone did pull a permit to do a roof replacement at the main house sometime back a decade ago, but I don't actually know if it was followed through or what happened, because the roof is in pretty tough shape. I almost want to believe that it was originally concrete roof tiles.
You said the house was built when?
This house is 1925.
So it's unlikely that they were concrete roof tiles at that point, 1925. I had a conversation with Miss Mettner before she left, not about this house, but about roofing materials in general, which is part of what is making me ask this question in terms of what is appropriate. And I think I'll wait for staff to come up and we can continue the conversation.
Okay. Yeah, as far as the main house goes, we weren't looking to rub anybody the wrong way. So we were just looking to keep what's there and fix it. And as far as the garage goes, I'm pretty sure the client is open to anything. I mean, the guest house does have the Spanish tiles. I'm not sure how well that's going to mesh with the Tudor-esque. It's just going to look, I think, weird. So the concrete seemed most appropriate for us. And it's nicer than asphalt shingle. So that's why we went with it.
I'll just ask another question since I'm on a roll here. I'm excited to hear about the restoration of the original front entry and the evidence that you provided on the images with that. I mean, I definitely think that that's sufficient to understand that this was a later addition. Was there any other investigation that was done, seeing if you could find original drawings or pictures of the facade, just to know that you were restoring it as best you could?
Absolutely, yeah. But we had dead ends. We didn't get anywhere.
If I just may speak on that subject, having been to this house multiple times with Tom and Sue present, this home was uniquely constructed of hollow clay masonry, like Walter mentioned earlier, double width. That's unusual. Usually you'd find in El Cid, in this historic district, you might find a single width hollow clay masonry. This is actually double width with mortar between. The stem walls are actually 14 inches, give or take, wide. This was a well-built historic structure for its time. To answer your question, Ms. Kellogg, I had walked across this home and looked at kind of openings in the sheetrock and plaster here and there and looked at the roof. It all seemed original to me, and the hollow clay masonry forming around the openings where there was spaces where I can peek in, outlet boxes were popped out. They were all original. So in terms of anything that's not original here, again, I think as Walter mentioned, the sunroom is clear and this front arcade is clear. Everything else is original.
Along those lines, I've always been curious, the second window that's smaller, is that original? I mean, I'm sure you can tell because of the way it was framed in. Was it always smaller or was it a later alteration?
So we were talking about this during the, we were waiting for the hearing to start. As much as I wish it did match and I wanted to, in my opinion, that room has always been a bathroom. I can tell by the age of the plumbing and the tub and everything that's there. There is a lot of stucco repair on this facade, but it's also related to water issue because this arcade was never connected to the house appropriately. So while it looks like there's been some stucco work on the outside, and the inside, I didn't see any evidence that there was anything ever different there.
Thank you.
Yeah, and on that note, I just think this was kind of a change during construction. I think as originally drawn or designed, I think the intention was to make it symmetrical about the center, but then they realized that they couldn't build the linen closet in that bathroom. So it made for an awkward placement for a full-size window, which then offsetting the window seemed like the key. But again, that linen closet would have been original based on its plaster just on the walls.
Any further questions? Well, kudos to your clients for taking this on. It's a big project.
Thank you. Yeah, Tom is in the audience. He's gone out of his way to fly in for this hearing, just in case there was any decision need to be made.
Thanks for being here.
Yeah.
And thanks for taking this on. Okay, great. So we'll go on to the staff report. Thank you.
Good evening. Ann Hamilton presenting case numbers 23-60 and 23-61 concurrently. These are for a rear and side setback variance, and then additions and alterations and new construction of an accessory structure at 232 Grayman Drive. This property is located in the Prospect Southland Park Historic District. It was built in 1925, and as the applicant very clearly showed, it's been in pretty rough condition for a while. The request for 2360 is for a variance from section 94-82B2 of the Zoning and Land Development Regulations, which requires a primary structure in the SF14C3 zoning district to have a 10-foot side setback and 12-foot 8 rear setback. The applicant is requesting to replace the existing second-story connector between the main house and accessory structure with a ground floor connector, which requires the establishment of this variance as the connector is moving. As it stands, the applicant is requesting a 4'11" setback at the closest points of the existing structure versus the required 10-foot and 12-foot 8, which would allow them to retain the connector and actually simply leaves the guest house in its existing location. The other opportunity would be to disconnect the structure, and that would, as the applicant stated, mean that we would then have a guest house that is over the allowable square footage for an accessory structure at 1,200 square feet. For case number 23-61, the request is for new construction of a 436 square foot garage structure, reconstruction of that connector pending the approval of the variance, connecting the guest house and the main house, which totals about 110 square feet, and general alterations to the structure, which includes removing that non-original front entry feature and enclosing some openings on the existing sunroom to convert it to a kitchen. This is the existing site. As was discussed previously, I would probably classify this more as a Mediterranean-inspired Tudor or a Tudor-inspired Mediterranean. Which one you think that it leans to is probably up to interpretation, but it's certainly a very unique architectural style. So the proposal, as you can see here circled, is to do the connector in a slightly different location than it's currently existing, and leave the guest house in the location that it currently exists in, and then build that 2-car garage further away on the site. This is the existing first floor plan and the proposed. Again, not much is added in terms of square feet beyond that sky bridge going to the ground floor. This is the existing second floor plan and the proposed, and the elevations, which the applicant did a very good job of presenting. Probably the one area that I had a little bit of concern on was the sunroom. Obviously not an original feature to the home, but it was an addition to the structure, and by removing some of the fenestration on it, it seems like it reads like a different addition and doesn't quite reflect the history of the site. That's the primary reason I wanted a few more windows on that kitchen. But I certainly don't, have any requirement for it to remain as a sunroom. These are the west elevations, existing and proposed, particularly showing that sky bridge moving down to a ground story connector. The south elevation, the rear, and with the guest house removed for more clarity. And then the east elevations. And then the elevations of that garage structure. Staff felt that the request for building an accessory garage structure, rather than attaching it to any point on the home, was more appropriate. Generally attached garages, I think, are not as preferable as a detached garage, and so I think that is a good solution if the applicant does require space for cars, as most people do in this day and age. This is the existing connector. It obviously is not the most well constructed. However, based on the green card evidence, it has existed since at least 1962. Probably not since 1952. It doesn't show up on the Sanborn map. But for as rickety as it is, it's a apparently been existing a lot longer than you'd expect. That was originally a garage apartment. I think the garage has now been removed and it's just a guest house. We are recommending approval for both the variants because it does meet 10 of the 10 variance standards, and approval with conditions for the HPB case. As the applicant spoke to, one of the conditions was changing that sliding glass door, which obviously is an original feature, to a French door, adding a few more windows to the former sunroom, and providing information on the green building strategies. There was an additional condition about the front French doors and possible opalescent glass. After taking photos for the meeting and walking up to them, I don't believe that that glass is original. I think it was probably originally clear glass, but it was hard to tell from real estate photos. So I'm recommending removal of that condition. These are the 10 variance standards that we do believe that it meets. Those should be in your packet, but I can read through them if there's any particular that you'd like more information on, but we do believe that it complies with all of them. So we are recommending approval of both the variance and approval with conditions for the HPB case. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions of staff?
The roofing material.
Yeah, I was going to say, can you go back to that green card? It was up there so quickly I couldn't read it, but. Let's see. Tile.
So it does say cement tile is the roofing material on the green card.
In 62.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which would have been a prevalent building material for roof structure at that time.
Yeah.
Just based on my experience, I don't think that that would have been an original roofing material.
What did the Sanborn map say?
Regarding roofing material, I don't think it has any information on that.
No, okay. I just saw it had something written on, I can't even read it.
Yeah, it says tile, but I believe that's referring to the construction of the home.
Okay.
I just wonder, given the uniqueness of this style for our district, well, and in general, if a different roofing material would be appropriate.
Does a Tudor style typically have outriggers?
Well, that's why I don't really feel like it's a Tudor style. I feel like it's a mission.
Like a Tudor influence.
Yeah.
But I don't know, and I've been thinking about it since you first posed it, and I think it probably was barrel tile, especially since the back building is barrel tile. It's like they built the sky bridge, added that like opalescent glass, made a little 60s, probably redid the roof. I don't know. And do you have any?
I don't want to speculate, but I think that it would look appropriate with barrel tile. I think that it looks like it, to me, had barrel tile originally, but without definitive evidence.
I just don't know if I've ever seen outriggers like that with anything other than barrel tile.
Right, that's a good point.
And that's what makes me lean towards
Yeah, the massing of the house, there's certain elements of it that actually remind you, I think it's a Y that could be a fascio, but that's in I think it's Prospect Park, but it's similar, and it does have a barrel tile on it.
You're talking about the fascio on Washington?
Mm-hmm. There's certain massing about that I just see similarities to it. Yeah, I mean, I think the flat concrete tile is not appropriate, so I don't know if that's something the applicant would be open to.
Like you were saying, if it was a vernacular style, somebody's idea of a Tudor in Florida, and since the concrete tiles were inappropriate, then it would seem to me that the barrel tiles would be appropriate.
I'm thinking about, speaking of another Fazio house in Phipps Plaza, I think it has a barrel tile roof.
Yeah, there's a few on the island that have some vernacular type elements.
The other
That have
Fazio
barrel.
on, in the estate section has a flat tile. But I don't know when that dates from. It's on the lake. I can't remember which street it's on. Todd Michael Glazer did it. Do you know which one? The one that they painted the wood?
I think I know which one you're talking about now.
Yeah.
I think there's one on Alvarado too, in the 200 block. There's a few fascios that were like Tudor-esque that did
Yeah.
have barrel tile in the 200 and 300 blocks of Alvarado.
Yeah.
So I think he's open to barrel tile, I think.
Great.
That's what I'm gathering.
Great. I think it would be really additive. Like, I think it would add, character, dimension to the roof.
If I just may say something on the roof again. I'm personally not supportive of the barrel tile, just on the basis of it not being customary to a Tudor, which is the intention of this home. I think probably, if I were to speculate, what would have been original to this home that probably had to be replaced at some point in time would have either been a slate or, in modern day time, a composite concrete that looks like slate or a composite fiberglass that looks like slate. That would be more in keeping with the other Tudor-style homes, even in Palm Beach. There's a home 210 Via Del Mar.
I think what we're saying is we don't feel like it actually is a Tudor style home. We feel like it's a Spanish, I don't know if it's Mediterranean or Mission, but that it's truly more of a home like that has Tudor influences, and that's what's informing our comments.
I'll just say this would be the first Tudor-style home that I've ever seen as an architect or studied that would have a barrel tile roof. That's just me personally. I think slate would be more appropriate. Obviously, there's differences in opinion that could be had all night about this subject. But personally, I think
Well, I said slate originally, and if you want to go in that direction, because I said, if this home has a sort of a balancing act between Tudor and the Mediterranean, then certainly having a slate roof would push it more into Tudor.
Yeah, agreed. But I also could just point out to the eaves here on this home where it basically has a drip edge, the sheathing, and then the open rafter tails. This eave and this overhang is very thin. I think that was personally intended. There's 2x4s as your rafters. Stacking a barrel tile will be unusually larger in proportion to the eaves as they follow the perimeter. Thanks.
I think the barrel tile is a South Florida adaptation. I don't really know of any. I can't think of any. There may be one of landmarks that have slate roofs.
I agree.
Yeah. I just pulled up a Tudor style, I think it's a Meisner on Worth Avenue, right across from the Everglades Club, and it has a barrel tile roof.
I do have a question for staff that's not related to the roof, if that's okay. In the images that are provided on the French doors, it looks like there's some kind of like wooden dowel detail.
Let me see if I have anything like that in the presentation.
Like almost a decorative, I hesitate to call it a screen, but it's some additive detail. And I just wanted clarification on exactly what that is. It's on one of the side, maybe the east side elevation of the home.
Do you know what page that was in the packet? I don't think I have a picture of it in the presentation.
It looks like it's 181 in the packet.
Okay. You had mentioned safety bars. That's not what's going on there, correct? That is a. I think she's talking about this.
Oh. No, those are security bars.
Okay,
Yeah, it's.
that answers my question. Thank you.
Any further questions of staff? Any discussion about the fenestration of any questions about the sunroom or anything like that before we move on?
I do. I'll chime in there.
Sure.
So I think this is definitely your classic case of what is your identity on this one. We're all going to get to that conclusion here shortly. What is going to be the defining moment? And I think when you hear the word sunroom, it's going to be light, energy, like what is that iconic pop? And I think we're going to come to some sort of a conclusion on what does that look like? And if we're going to be going on a Tudor style, maybe there could be some sort of glass work that could be really iconic, and it's going to be up to the board to decide on that. But to me, perhaps that could be part of it. And I know we're in the discussion with the staff. Is that something that has been explored on that sunroom, as an example?
I mean, I'd probably mostly be looking for just adding another window at the very least. Don't want to add too much there. I think it's just it no longer reads as a 1960s sunroom edition. It reads as a room edition, I guess. That's where I was coming from, but defer to the board's perspective on that.
Thank you. And I do want to comment on this one. 10 out of 10 variants to pass on that one. So whoever it was, that's an unsung hero. Kudos to that. So I just wanted to point that out. Thank you.
Any further questions of staff? Okay, thank you. Any members of the public? Okay, we'll go into executive session. Do we want to talk about, I guess, the variance first?
Can I actually speak to something else while we're in executive session? So on the green building standards that were listed, there's a note for closed cell spray foam. And I just would like our board to be clear that we would not like that utilized as a green building standard. The issue with closed cell foam is that if there's a leak, it keeps all the water in. And so on numerous projects, I mean, I didn't even realize that people still use closed cell foam, but it can cause a lot of damage to historic buildings. So if you spray that up in the attic, you can basically have your roofing structure rotted out by holding that in. So I just wanted to make sure that that is not implemented in this, especially when you're trying to use it for a bonus. And then just the other note that I had was about the cornice detail at the sunroom, simplifying that. I think it just reads really heavy, like a new med rev, and not in character with our vernacular Tudor Mediterranean that we have before us.
Yeah, Kristen, I'm gonna springboard on that. I also had a problem with the sunroom, not so much the window. I don't really care about that one way or the other. They're retrofitting the sunroom into a kitchen. I had a problem with the depiction of the stucco, the foundation line or the score line. The trim is definitely wrong proportion, and I kind of was struck by the railing of the project on that sunroom. I see the reason. I see that the existing conditions showed that they kind of blew out that wall and they kind of jumped on the roof and kind of hung out there. I also am, I don't have an opinion one way or the other, quite honestly. I don't think that I'm knowledgeable enough to speculate on what the roofing material is, I would be supportive of the application as proposed in that regard. But I'm having a little bit of digestion problems with the sunroom, but not for the fenestration reasons. And I'm in complete support of the variances.
I agree I'm okay with the fenestration of the former sunroom. I mean, theoretically, they could have asked for permission to fully demolish it and, propose a new addition there. So I'm okay with the fenestration as proposed, but I do think it does feel a little heavy at the top, and maybe that could be restudied with staff.
I think the proposed variance is in keeping with how it's been used in the past. I don't think this type of application is anything new for us.
Yeah, I am supporting the variance also, and I totally agree with Mr. Murphy in his opinions. I agree on that.
Any thoughts on the roofing material?
I don't have a preference. I mean, usually a Tudor in England will have a slate, like was said before, but if your opinion is a barrel tile will, be more appropriate for West Palm Beach, I am supportive.
I think also for just this neighborhood, I don't know what that expense would have been. I mean, that wouldn't have been anything that you could procure locally. So they would have had to bring that in, and would that have been done for a property like this? That clearly is one of the grander homes in the neighborhood, but I don't know if that would have really been something that someone would have spent money on back then. Any further thoughts? Would someone like,
On Long Island, there's a mansion called the Bayard Cutting Arboretum, and it's in a Tudor style. And I was just looking at it, where the cafeteria is, would be equivalent to the sunroom that we're talking about, but it almost looks like an addition, and certainly the windows are appropriate. They are large single pane windows, even though the rest of the mansion is, untouched.
any further discussion? I think we need two motions, one for the variance and one for the rehabilitation.
Do we have any kind of consensus on the roof? It sounds like we're pretty split.
Yeah.
I'm in favor for it either way. I mean, there's barrel tile on the additional structure. To when that was added, it's unknown. But I mean, I think it's sort of, it doesn't have an identity. It's all. I mean, you'd almost lean maybe it does. It is more in keeping with Mission or Med. You know, you have on the front elevation, you do have obviously sort of that Tudor influence, but everything else just really lends itself more towards being Med. But I mean, as it sits with me, it could go either way.
Maybe we could just ask the applicant for a further study and to review their findings with staff in terms of the roofing material. I do think that the barrel tile is the way to go.
I would say just try the motion and see
Just
what happens.
race to the motion before anyone else can. Do we do the variance
Separate. Yeah, there's
motion
wording.
first or second?
First, right? So you need the variance to do the project, right?
Exactly, yeah, to approve the alterations, you actually need to approve the variance first.
Okay.
I move that the Historic Preservation Board grant application number 23-60, a request by Design R Architects on behalf of Nirvana 7 LLC for a variance from section 94-82B2 of the Zoning and Land Development Regulations, which requires a primary structure to have a 10-foot setback and a 12-foot 8 rear setback in a single-family, high-density residential context, SF14C3 zoning district at 232 Graymond Drive. The applicant is requesting a 411 side and rear setback, thus granting a 5'1" side setback variance and a 7'9" rear setback variance. The motion is based on the testimony presented along with the application submitted and the staff report, which constitutes competent substantial evidence. The Historic Preservation Board hereby makes finding of fact that each of the 10 criteria in Article 2, Section 94-38D6 have been met for the variance.
Do you have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, variance granted.
And I was just backtracking for the conditions.
Yeah, they're like hidden at the very beginning, I think.
Okay.
It's,
Okay, here we go. I see it. The sliding glass door, the kitchen. I think the justification has generally been met. Okay, I'm going to try and motion then. And I move that the Historic Preservation Board approve application number 23-61. Is that correct, Ann? Yeah, correct. For additions and new construction of an accessory structure in accordance with standards 9 and 10 as set forth in section 94-49 of the city's zoning and land development regulations. The motion is based on the testimony presented along with competent substantial evidence. In addition, the approval of this request is made conditional upon the following restrictions, stipulations, and/or safeguards that I believe are necessary to ensure compliance with the purpose and intent of the Historic Preservation Ordinance, the historic preservation element of the comprehensive plan of the City of West Palm Beach, the Secretary of Interior standards for rehabilitation, and additional criteria set forth in section 94-49 of the city's zoning and land development regulations. The conditions include the following. 1, the sliding glass door on the second floor of the east elevation shall be revised to a French door with divided lights. 2, the kitchen shall have more windows added to the north and east elevations to more appropriately reflect, scratch that one. Let me just start over with the conditions. We have 1, the sliding glass door on the second floor of the east elevation shall be revised to a French door with divided lights. 2, the detailing at the sunroom shall be simplified and restudied and reviewed at the staff level. 3, in terms of the green building strategies, the closed cell spray foam shall not be used. And 4, the roofing material shall utilize a barrel tile.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries, project approved, thank you. Good luck. We hope you'll invite us for a tour when you're done.
Or submit for an award.
And with that, can we have a motion to adjourn?
I move to adjourn tonight's Historic Preservation Board meeting.
Do you have a
Second.
second? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Meeting adjourned.